morning. So the difficult thing to start this conversation is we've seen what the future looks like and how people are using this sexy technology. And now I'm going to talk to you about boring security stuff. This is Worldpay in big numbers. We're doing 36 million transactions a day. That's 415 a second. But on the 11th of November, it'll be one of the busiest card transaction days in the world. It's not Christmas. It's not Valentine's Day. Why are we doing that? Well, in China, they are doing Singles Day. And Singles Day, you buy and celebrate being single, and it causes a huge uptick in the amount of traffic. We've got 400,000 merchants. Fascinatingly, we're using more than 300 payment methods in 126 currencies, 146 countries. And in the UK, we're doing 42% of all the transactions. So if any of you have got a credit card in your pocket and you've used it 3 times, we've almost certainly got your number. And your expiry date, and your name, and a few other bits of detail. And the reason you've never heard of Worldpay, but you've heard of all of these other people, is because we're the thing that sits behind them doing the payments. And we're not only doing it for the big brands, when you go to Tesco's, to eBay, Netflix, Apple, but we're also doing it in the pub around the corner, the hairdresser, the restaurant. And after I discovered when I started at Worldpay, every time I go shopping now, I end up looking at the thing and noting the little Worldpay logo on top of things. So in April 2015, the gentleman sitting at the back met me at Heathrow Airport. Bizarre thing, I was coming back from a late night and he said, we're starting an interesting project. We need a program director. Would you like to come along and have a chat? And the next day I started. Team of 1. Today we're a team of 30. And what we had to build was a platform which was going to deliver information to the entire organization in different ways. And delivering that information is about what we call multi-tenancy. So we've talked about analytics and reporting with an enterprise data warehouse, but we also want to improve the customer experience. So when you're talking about going onto a website and paying, sometimes it pops up Dynamic 3DS, the thing which asks you to verify by Visa. The issue there is you don't want to have that pop up every time. If you're paying a £1,000 transaction, yes, it's important. We really want to know it. If it's a £10 recurring subscription, you really don't want to be bothered with it. That's friction for the payment. It actually limits how much payment, whether people are willing to complete the payment. So for our merchants, customer experience of web payment is important. To do that, we need to put something real-time into the transaction path to understand that. And that takes getting the analytical history, analysing all the transactions that we have, and then building something which is a real-time engine to support it. And that's where we had to have a platform. But it had to be secure. So what sort of data do we have? Well, we've got card data. Lots of it have to meet PCI. Any of you in organizations which are holding card data, you will have to hold that information. We've got personally identifiable information. And theoretically, not in the UK, but in the US, we could get health data. We don't at the moment, but we could get it. So we've given up on PCI, PII, PHI. We just say PXI now. It's any personal data, and we're going to treat it with respect. And what we've got to do in this environment is we've got to build a set of systems. So we've got a number of data platforms, all these different platforms which take payments. We've got alternative payment platforms, core platforms, which do Visa or whatever. We've got to ingest that data, manipulate it into the data lake, and then make it available rapidly to different types of platforms. So we set out with a number of key design principles. First one, as it says up there, was that it had to be secure. That was our abiding principle. So much data, every credit card in the UK, we're going to be secure with it. Next, having chosen Hortonworks, we were going to stick with the stuff that was on the platform. So if it was available in the product, we did not want to have multiple vendors. We didn't want the integration problem. We were going to stick with one platform, and we were going to partner with our vendor to develop that. Next, I forgot which order I put them on, turn it all on. We're going to turn on all the security. If there's a security feature available, we're going to put it on. And then staged component deployment. So we're going to roll things out one at a time carefully. Given that this is only 18 months ago, how far we've come is amazing. And finally, we're going to POC all the products in our production environment. So putting data in secure environments is difficult. If you're going to encrypt, if you're going to have traffic coming off in real time, you need to actually, a lot of the vendors will come to you and say, we can do you a POC in the cloud, we'll show you the usefulness of the tool, and then you get the product in, and you try to secure it inside a secure environment, and you say, oh, don't support Kerberos, didn't do AD and Kerberos at the same time, can't do that, oh, these log files do that. So we actually decide to POC straight into our production environment with the tools. So what are our defenses? Well, we're fairly standard firewalls outside, limiting the number of edge devices, reverse proxies, and enforcing isolation. That's fairly boring. That's the line of defense that most people have. We also have authentication controls. So we've enabled everything, Kerberos, Active Directories, role-based access control, and then keys. Keys are critical in Hadoop environments. What you discover is that every open source project has put their key in a slightly different place or doesn't call to a central one, has different certificates which expire. So suddenly you actually have a key management challenge which you have to deal with. In the end, we went to Hortonworks, we partnered with them, and they built us a HSM integration, hardware security module integration to be able to store those keys in one place. And we're moving towards what's called attribute-based access control. So instead of tagging somebody and saying, you can see this data, this table, we're now tagging data and saying this is a PAN, this is a personal identifiable thing, and then saying this person can see PAN data, this person can see encrypted PAN data. So instead of securing at the table and object level, we're now trying to secure data at the attribute level. It's not fully there yet. It's certainly an evolving technology, but that's the level of paranoia that we get to with holding some of this data for you. And we've got data in motion, so encryption on the channel, 2 levels of security coming across the areas. Web interfaces for management using HTTPS. It's amazing, but of course what happens when you get open source technology is a lot of it defaults to an open port, which you can just attack. Do this for every component, and that's a challenge. And then managing inside of the cluster is only part of it, because the next challenge you have is the operational systems are 20 years old in some places, and so they don't support some of these things. They might not support TLS 1.2. How do you get data securely from A to B between 2 different secure environments? So it's a large challenge to keep on going through these things. And then protect local disk. This is not the Hadoop infrastructure. This is the file system that things exist on. So a lot of people don't know, for example, that if you're using something like MapR, sorry, not MapR, that's unfair, MapReduce, trouble with the brand name, that if you use a mapper and a reducer, it spills to disk. That spill to disk will write the clear PAN, or clear card data, to the local disk. You can go and search the log files for that data. These sorts of discoveries are things that you have to go through in order to make sure that everything is secure. So you end up encrypting local disk. You then protect the data at rest. This is the information that we hold on the HDFS, but that has a performance penalty. So how do you deal with that performance penalty? What we do is we use a process called tokenization to get the data secure. And once it's tokenized, because it's secure, we can put it onto the faster unencrypted disk. But now you have a pipeline problem in terms of what you're doing to the data and speed of data. I've had to protect data when it comes on local disk with encryption. I've now had to protect data as it comes onto HDFS. I've now got to move that twice before I can actually run analytics on it. So there's a time delay. So you're starting to build different challenges all the way around if you're going to be very secure. And we have to pay the uplift. If you bring a disk into Worldpay, into our data center, quite simply it ain't coming out again. Hardware vendors charge you for this privilege. But we're so paranoid that in case something's left on a disk, we actually don't let them take the disk out of the data center. We provide a certificate of destruction. So the level of paranoia that you can get to is quite extreme. We had a very talented Hadoop engineer join us recently from another organization, and in his interview he impressed us about how much he thought he knew about security. A month into this, he came to me and he said, "You've made me paranoid." The sheer amount of data that we have to handle. And then we deal with things like tokenization. So what tokenization is with data, and Facebook, Shazam just touched on it, is the idea of how do you handle this data, the tokens, and deal with it, is we change the information from something which is readable into a token. And to protect it, we take ideas like the credit card number down the bottom, and we convert it into uppercase letters. Not only is that creating, it's an algorithm which you can't reverse, not only is it converting it into uppercase and making it obscure, but if we had some PAN data seep through for some reason with everything else failed, it's obvious. So we call this university tokenized, obviously encrypted data, so that we can pick that information up. And you get to start thinking about, how do I do key rotation? Our operational systems only have to rotate the keys every 6 months. But if I want to compare information from 3 years ago, and the encryption key has changed, the two outcomes will be different. So you have to develop strategies for dealing with those sorts of things. So all of this is a heightened level of paranoia of information. So when we get to the end of this, we also discover that we've got to deal with environment management stuff. So it's patching so that we can get defenses, it's regular updates, it's a loop of putting things through so that we go through multiple times the test before we put it into production, penetration testing. All of this is day-to-day operations. So while we talk about the speed of big data, if you're running a big data team doing this sort of work, there's a traditional established set of work that you have to do, which you just can't do quickly if it's going to be a secure environment. So, what have the pain points been? Translating open source into enterprise ready for us. To put it into a secure environment, what you discover is that all the projects are really good. Hive is really good, Oozy is really good, Spark's really good. And they all develop slightly differently. They all integrate slightly differently. They all do security slightly differently. So if you're going to live in a paranoid environment, putting that information across it and dealing with it is difficult. Turning everything on, while important to us, is a complete pain. And you find every flaw that there is, every piece of moving things around. What's the next one? Vendor-specific security. So it's great that we can look at Apache code and see what we do with this if we download Apache, but Hortonworks implementation is different from Cloudera's, which is different from MapR's. So finding the skills and the people who know how to do this is more difficult. And then understanding. It's been hard to persuade people, especially vendors, just how serious we are about the security all the time to do these things. But as I point out, we've got 335 million discrete credit card numbers in the system. It's kind of a big amount of data to lose. Quick touch around who we've been using. Cisco for the hardware, Hortonworks, ThinkBig as consultancy, Wishworks. The HP enterprise stuff is the voltage encryption, which is the tokenization components, and the Vormetric is the local disk protection. And that's our platform. But we'll finish on a high note. What have we got? In 18 months, we've moved from 1 to 30 people. We've deployed 2 production clusters, 56 nodes. 20 core, 12 4-terabyte disks in each node. Environments built using the same template, so all 4 of our core environments are the same, so that we can replicate data around with them. Our clusters are on-premise, but we've also built a burst-to-cloud capability so that we can take the tokenized data and move it out to the cloud for burst capability. We've done 2 big Hortonworks updates. We've backed 60 billion credit card numbers from our first 2 platforms onto the system. We'll probably double that in the next 6 months. And after that, the world's our oyster because we've got a lot of smaller platforms to do after that. And we're in the process, not only do we have our reporting and analytics capability, but we're well down the line of doing the clever stuff, which a lot of people I'm envious of, you'll hear from later, talking about what they've achieved. We're doing our decision engines now. We're already getting benefit from understanding that information. But now we've got a big pool of this data, and we can actually start to exploit this. So, while we're leaders in modern money, we like to think of ourselves as innovating in the secure data area and taking that opportunity to bring a large amount of data so that we can take advantage of all the tools. But it's a challenge in an organization. And that opportunity is somewhere we're well on the journey to. Any questions? Hi, go.
Have one here.
They've got coming with mics down this side.
Thank you. Hi, you mentioned about capturing health data, as well as being a policy in place about that. I was wondering if you could just tell me a little bit more about that.
We don't at the moment, but there's a theoretical possibility, and some of the details you get about what the transaction's being used for. So the theoretical, it's not actual at the moment, but it's if you used your credit card in an American hospital, because it's a transaction data, you might get something with that. So we have to protect against it, even though we don't get it now.
And is that something you said different between being the US and the UK? You could do it in the US, but not here?
No, private medical care in the US.
Oh, I'm with you. Yeah, okay.
You don't pay when you go to the NHS. You do pay there, so you may get a credit card transaction. So in thinking about security, that's what we've got to think about. 146 countries. What's the rule in the US? What's the rule in the UK? What's worst case of all the data we may get? British tourist in the US, healthcare, what could happen? What might we see?
Yeah, thank you.
Laura. Gentleman there.
Hi. This question is not security related. So the first speaker was talking about the blockchain technology, putting out all the companies whose major role is to serve as a trusted party in a transaction out of business. Yeah. So what do you think about it? Why do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree. I think blockchain is really important. It's critical. We are about a secure transaction. And we are investing in that idea as well. And beyond that, that's where we stop talking about it, because we've got super bright people in our innovation team who are looking at all sorts of technologies. And we've been looking at blockchain, and we will have something at some point in the future. What? I don't know. What our role? Not my job. I've got to build this thing.
Hi.
Yeah, okay.
I was just wondering if the government's increasingly putting pressure on organizations to provide them with a sort of backdoor access to a lot of these secure networks. And I was just wondering if that resulted in a conflict with you guys in creating a secure environment for transactions and also making sure the government doesn't yell at you.
Yeah. Definitely. We have a security team, again, outside my area. I get told we have a big security team. They deal with all of that outside requests. I don't have to worry about it. But what they do is they have policy and procedures. We have a corporate response plan for this sort of thing. So I don't know what they are, and even if I did, we wouldn't discuss them. But there is that potential. They're clearly fraud, terrorism is an issue. Prior to working at Worldpay, I was at the Dutch National Police, which is coming at it from the other angle on what we do about investigation data and those sorts of things. So it's a challenge. It's not something we discuss because in fact, there was a slide about it here, and I took it out after security reviewed it. So there are a bunch of things that came out of these slides, and trying to, you do a title for a presentation, then you talk to security, and they go, don't mention that one. Don't say, do these things. That's paranoia with it, unfortunately. Any more? Yeah,
hi. Was your solution on-premise solution or a cloud-based?
So we're on-premise now. We do all our core encryption technologies on-premise in secure environments. Once it's all tokenized and safe, we have the capability. We do some data partnering with people So we have the capability of pushing that out to cloud to share it. Actually, we do secondary tokenization. So what all of our core tokens are internal only. And to pass it to a third party, we would re-tokenize it on top of the original encryption. So it'd be two steps away from the card. And then we can share the data anonymized about profiling.
So you have two levels of security, first at the on-premise level, and then you reprocess the data and retokenize and send it to cloud.
We're not doing that yet. We have the capability, we've done it, we've tested it, but we're not doing it yet operationally. We just know what we're going to do. We've gone through the challenges of working what we're doing. So today, Worldpay, on-premise, secure, capability built, but not used.
For a newbie, if you want to recommend something from your experience, will you prefer on-premise or cloud if you start it again?
I've done projects in both, different environments, different customers. I mean, yeah, I'm sure you'll have lots of interesting talks this afternoon. Different environments need different levels of security. This is a secure environment with a lot of stuff moving through it. To not do it on premise would be a bad plan. If I'd been at an insurance clickstream site where all my servers are in the cloud already, I'll do it in the cloud. But I'm doing a secure, encrypted, right close to the transaction system, so we're doing that on-prem. It's not a right or a wrong, it's where the organization that's deploying it needs it. Any more? I think we've got one more minute.
Hi there.
One more question.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's super interesting. I'm impressed by going from nothing to what you've got in 18 months. I'm kind of interested in some key business processes that got you there in terms of key hires. Did you have buy-in and a really clear vision from the start, or did you have to develop that and sell that up first?
It's unusual for me. The guy who's sitting at the back of the room was the CFO of one of the divisions. And he thought data was important. And he and the CIO got together and created a role of head of data transformation, which is what Mark does. The CEO, the CIO, and the head of data transformation are absolutely committed to this. So we arrived, there's no legacy BI infrastructure because we've been part of RBS up until that point. And I arrived on day one and we literally set out what is our vision. And that's where we went. So nothing but, I actually did, again, another slide I had, which I think got taken out, was the people, but we did that. Our team is a mixture of youth and experience. We've got young developers who've never used Hadoop who we've trained. We've got good Hadoop developers who we've hired. We've also got older heads and managers who are grey, wizened old men like me who've necessarily done operations but may not have done Hadoop, who understand deploying it. Recruitment's been a huge challenge. I mean, 30 people in 18 months means I spend two full days a week interviewing sometimes at peak points. But that's an aggressive, committed team, and that's what we, as a team, that's what we are. We aim to get around 70% permanent, 20% contract, 10% consultants. We never hit it, because every new project development, we get contract or something in to boost the things, but we're moving in that direction. Okay, I think that was the last question. So thank you very much.